My name is Mary Beth Rogers, and I wrote a biography of Barbara Jordan. Her father was a part-time Baptist minister and a warehouse worker. Her mother was very involved in church. She had two sisters and grew up in the heart of the Good Hope Missionary Baptist Church in Houston, which was the dominant African American church at that time. When Barbara was in high school, and she was in the segregated Phyllis Wheatley High School in Houston, a speaker came to the school, Edith Sampson, who was a lawyer from Chicago. And President Truman had appointed her to be an assistant delegate or take some role at the United Nations. So Edith Sampson was a very successful and outstanding African American woman at the time. And she spoke at Wheatley High School. Barbara was bowled over. She had never seen anyone who had the poise or the dress or the manner or someone who was so articulate. And she decided right then and there she wanted to be a lawyer. She didn't have a clue as to what a lawyer did, but if this was the kind of person that you could be if you were a lawyer, that's what Barbara wanted. And so she went home and told her family, and I think Barbara was 16 at the time, I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, you know, they didn't really encourage her because it was such a long shot. She operated a law practice at first at her family dining room table, and then opened a little office in the Fifth Ward in Houston, which again was the segregated black area. She thought being a lawyer was the most wonderful thing that she could do as a human being. One of the new Senate seats in Houston encompassed the black Fifth Ward and the Third Ward, and that part of Houston that had a large African American population. It also extended into downtown Houston and included the whole business community. And some people suggested, well, Barbara, why don't you take a shot at that seat? There were several people in the race, but Barbara won that state Senate seat and then went to the Texas legislature in 1966. After Barbara went to the Texas State Senate, if there was one person she considered a mentor, it would be Lyndon Johnson. He had invited her to come to a meeting in Washington with a number of other black leaders, and Barbara just, of course, was so excited that she had been included and sat around a conference table, and he called on her to speak. Now, of course, he knew probably more about her than she thought he might have known, and he was very impressed with what she said, and he told his buddies, she's a comer, let's help her. And so I think Barbara appreciated his interest when she ran for Congress and was elected to the Congress. And he helped her get a choice committee assignment on the House Judiciary Committee, and of course that made a whole difference in her life when she served on that committee during the Watergate hearings. So I think if Barbara were here today and you ask her who was the single most important mentor in your life, she would probably say Lyndon Johnson. People with big personalities usually have big egos, and Barbara had a big personality and she loved the attention. She reveled in it. And she rose to it. You know, some people can expand and become more of who they are when they feed off the energy of other people. And Barbara was like that. So she enjoyed the public attention that she got. She liked to be the center of attention. And because of her bearing and her size and the power of her voice, when Barbara walked into a room, you know, people knew it, and she liked to have that effect. Barbara read everything. The whole matter was, did Nixon violate the Constitution? Did he overstep his bounds as President of the United States? Barbara read the Constitution. She read the Federalist Papers. She did everything she could to fully understand the nature of the charges that were being brought against him. And she was fairly quiet during the early stages of the hearing. The chair of the committee was Peter Rodino of New York. And Rodino knew that Barbara would bring something to the final testimony as they were making the articles of impeachment. And he asked Barbara to do, I think it was the summation. And that's when she basically taught the American people about the Constitution.
Today I am an inquisitor. and hyperbole would not be fictional and would not overstate the solemnness that I feel right now. My faith in the Constitution is whole, it is complete, it is total. And I am not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the diminution, the subversion, the destruction of the Constitution. Who can so properly be the inquisitors for the nation as the representatives of the nation themselves? The subjects of its jurisdiction are those offenses which proceed from the misconduct of public men, and that's what we're talking about. In other words, from the abuse or violation of some public trust.
It was explosive. She left the hearing that night. Of course, it was televised. There were, millions of people who watched it. When she left the Capitol that night, there were people standing outside waiting to greet her. She didn't know the impact that she had until later that night and early the next day. And overnight, she became an overnight sensation. Mail poured in. She got requests to be on television shows and newspaper interviews, and all of a sudden, she became perhaps the most famous member of Congress. When she left the Congress, for a number of reasons, I think primarily because she had learned she had multiple sclerosis. It was becoming more and more difficult. Very few people knew at the time that she had any kind of problem. But she decided to come home in Texas and try to have some sort of normal life. And one of her colleagues in the Texas Senate, when she served there, Don Kennard, who's since deceased, was involved with the University of Texas, and he called the LBJ school. He says, somebody ought to grab up Barbara and let her teach these students what government is about, what the Constitution is about. And Elspeth Rostow was the dean of the LBJ school and called Barbara, and Barbara was interested. It was a new challenge for her, and she taught a graduate seminar. She now started reading philosophy, the philosophy of the law, the philosophy of ethics, and she put together a basic course at the LBJ school, and people clamored to get in her class. She was voted outstanding professor so many times that they eventually retired her from the process, but she always had a waiting list to be in her classes because they were so outstanding. I think she would say, if this is a dream of yours, find a way to pursue it. Look at the obstacles you face. Find a way to overcome them. She did tell, one of her former students told me, who's now an elected official, I won't reveal his name, but he wanted to run for office, and she said, go make some money first, so you'll have some financial independence, so you won't be beholden to those who want something from you. So that might be her advice to someone. If you want to go to law school, if you want to be a lawyer, figure out how to make that possible for you. If you've got to work 2 jobs, go work 2 jobs. It's interesting, when Barbara went to law school at Boston, she had not been as well educated as many of the Ivy Leaguers who came from those Ivy League schools who went into the law school. But Barbara would stay up all night and study. She had to prove to herself that she could be the equal of anyone who had a better education than she did. So Barbara would say, work for it, go for it, but realize that you may make certain sacrifices along the way. But if this is your dream, you have to figure out a way to do it, and then you have to pursue that dream, and you have to focus on every act that you do to make sure that it is in line with what your ultimate goal is. She thought being a lawyer was the most wonderful thing that she could do as a human being.